There's been literally a ton of talks lately about the successor to the Nintendo Switch, the Switch 2, whatever they're going to call it. But for me, yeah, sometimes it can be fun to speculate on things. I have my, hopes with the successor to the Switch, but until Nintendo says anything officially, you take everything with a grain of salt. That's the way I'm looking at it. I mean, I hope for backwards compatibility, more powerful hardware, that kind of thing. But until they say something, yeah, that's all I'm waiting for. But today we do have something interesting that is legit that was published just a couple days ago about analog sticks. Now, patents from Nintendo, there's been tons of them, and I've covered quite a few in the past, and most of the time patents go nowhere. Nothing ever happens with them. This one, though, I'm having a good feeling about. I really find this interesting. So, this is for a new analog stick. Is this going to be on the Switch 2? Maybe. Is this just going to be in Nintendo controllers going forward? Who knows? We'll have to wait and see, but this really sounds interesting to me. It is a long document. We cannot go through this entire thing, but I will link to it so you could dissect it and go through it. But we'll look at a few things here. So they state this information processing system includes a controller, including an operation element to be displaced from an initial position by user's operation. A restoring force imparting section applying a restoring force for returning the displaced operation element to the initial position. A resistance section using a magnet orheological fluid, I don't know how to say that, whose viscosity changes with the magnetic field intensity, which becomes resistant when the operation element is displaced from or to the initial position, and a magnetic field generation section, which provides the magnetic field to the fluid, and a circuit capable of controlling the magnetic field generation section. Are they creating like a teleportation device to Mars? No, it's an analog stick that has some kind of fluid in it that the viscosity changes. So there's, multiple types of analog sticks, right? And we've had this stick drift syndrome with the Nintendo Switch. I never used my Joy-Cons. I hate the Joy-Cons. I never used them. But then, my kids got a Switch. They started using the Joy-Cons. They got bad drift after just a couple months. I swapped them out, gave them my Joy-Cons. Then the same thing. A few months later, they got Joy-Con. This is ridiculous. So much Joy-Con drift in the world. Nintendo was good about replacing them, though. I got multiple replacements where it seemed like they gave me new Joy-Cons. And then I think the third or fourth time, there's a few times I've swapped Joy-Cons. Nobody in my house really uses Joy-Cons anymore because it was getting ridiculous. But it was like the third or fourth time they sent me used ones, and they were visibly, you could tell they were used. I was like, man, this sucks, dude. But yeah, Joy-Con drift was the freaking biggest negative with the Switch, I think, for a lot of people. And with multiple types of, analog sticks, you have standard ones that use electrical resistance to detect the movement, and you can get that wear because there's physical contact. And that was the issue with the Joy-Con analog sticks. Then you have Hall effect sticks, which, mind you, there's so many people out there who think that's new technology. It is not. The Sega Saturn 3D pad used Hall effect in their analog stick. It's not new technology. It's just technology that should have been being used for a long while. Hall effect sticks, they use magnets and electrical conductors to measure the movement of, the analog stick to detect, how you're moving it, where you're walking type of thing in the game. And there's no physical contact between the parts. You didn't have that electrical resistance where, there could be that grinding on the metal plate down there type of thing. There's other ways the N64 with the gears and bowls. And then analog sticks, they'll use a certain, a type of setup to have that resistance to center the stick back in. Normally it'll be the axes. They'll be almost like a gimbal and then a spring to have that resistance to kind of recenter it. But things could wear out and you could start getting a little bit of drift. Newer sticks get the same thing. It can happen, but with this, it just seems really interesting. These little diagrams with the squares, they explain them a little more. You could go through and check that all out. But I want to get to the part where they kind of go over it in a little more detail. But as you see this, hey, looks like a normal analog stick to me, but it's not. There's some kind of fluids in there moving around to increase the resistance to is like that's the question. That's one of the questions I have. Like this seems like some kind of hybrid Hall effect, but with some kind of liquid to recenter it and to detect resistance. Like, can they? I'm almost wondering, like, is the application of this where the viscosity, they could change the viscosity of the liquid to where the analog stick can like feel tighter, or is it just going to be used to recenter it or to detect position? Because that would be weird. Like, say you're in a game and there's some struggle. Like, say how the PlayStation DualSense controller with the analogs, how they have that resistance to them depending on the game. Like, could you do that with the analog sticks with this viscosity of liquids? Seems kind of weird. But they have all these diagrams which may not mean much to a lot of people. You got to read what each figure means, but then go back and look at them, and it's still like, okay, they're just squares with arrows next to them, right? But I do find this interesting. Let's get down to where it mentions more detail. Okay, so scrolling through, I found the pages that I wanted to talk about a little bit more. So this document's like 34 pages long, and there's a few pages where they give configuration examples, and then there's a bunch of pages explaining all the diagrams. Like I said, I'll put a link down below so you could take a look at this, read through everything if you want, but I'm just going to go and look at a few of these configuration examples to try to get a better idea of what they're talking about here, right? So like number 7, one configuration example is an information processing system, including a controller, including an operation element configured to be displaced from an initial position by a user's operation, so you physically moving the stick, and then a restoring force and parting section configured to apply a restoring force for returning a position of the displaced operation element to the initial position. So putting it back to center, right? That resistance that you have to have. And it seems like it's the fluid that they're using to do that. It's just interesting. So they're going to be using a fluid whose viscosity changes in accordance with an intensity of a magnetic field, and which serves as a resistance when the operation element is displaced from the initial position and to the initial position, and a magnetic field generation section configured to provide the magnetic field to the fluid. Yeah, I'm not going to keep stumbling over that word. And a circuit capable of controlling the magnetic field generation section. The circuit is configured to control the intensity of the magnetic field generated by the field generation section, so that the viscosity of the fluid periodically changes at least between a first viscosity state and a second viscosity state, in which the viscosity is lower than in the first state and has such a value that the operation element returns to the initial position by the restoring force. So like, this is interesting the way they're like talking about this, using a liquid and magnets to restore center, and I guess to, detect movement and all that kind of stuff. Weird, but this could be the future, man. Nintendo putting this patent out. Anybody else who's like, oh, like, yeah, we could use Hall effect sticks, but let's start putting some magnetic viscosity liquids in there. Nintendo's gonna be suing your ass. The hell, man. There's so many examples here, but like number 28, this is what I was wondering, and is this what it's talking about, where it could change depending on the game and cause like resistance? Is that what this is talking about? Definitely read through this and post your thoughts down below. But it says, in still another configuration example, in the case of performing the first viscosity control, the circuit may control the intensity of the magnetic field on the basis of the viscosity information outputted from the predetermined application. So like the game, right? The software. Further, in a case of performing the second viscosity control, the circuit may cause the controller to acquire the viscosity information from the preset library on the basis of designation of the preset from the predetermined application and the position information, indicating the position of the operation element, and to control the intensity of the magnetic field on the basis of the acquired viscosity information. There's a lot of weird stuff here. Like, okay, you're using this viscosity to recenter the analog stick. So yeah, that's interesting. And you're using magnets to control all this. So this really seems like, yeah, it's a Hall effect, but with this additional layer to it of this liquid resistance that could be used in numerous ways. And they outlined tons of different examples in this document. Can this be the future? Is this going to be something that Nintendo just thinks may work and they just put this together to protect the possibility of the future? Because with how complex, like, this really seems like a document to put together the Stargate, you know what I mean? So it's crazy looking, but it seems like something where they would have to put in a lot of time and work to fine tune and to make sure that the longevity of these sticks is good and that you're not going to have a situation where this liquid is an issue causing component to it, right? Like, it sounds like it could be fairly complicated, but it sounds promising at the same time. So yeah, let me know what you guys think. I just thought this was interesting, wanted to share with y'all. Appreciate it. Catch you on the next one. Bye.